The bold and the beautiful. The wedding that destroyed a dynasty, Ridge's fall from grace, and the civil war inside Forrester Creations. The day was supposed to be a triumph. The great Ridge Forrester and Brooke Logan, lovers across lifetimes, ready to tie the knot one final time. The Forrester estate had never looked more extravagant. Golden chandeliers reflected off glass sculptures. Guests were dressed in couture. Carter Walton stood ready to officiate. The press waited outside for the photos. Brooke, radiant in a gown designed by Eric himself, smiled with a confidence that came from years of waiting. Ridge stood beside her, proud, stoic, unaware that the world he had built was about to implode. As the music swelled and the words of eternal devotion hovered on Carter's lips, the back doors of the venue burst open. Taylor Hayes didn't wait for permission. She walked in like a force of nature, flanked by Steffi and a freshly returned Thomas Forrester, his expression tight with betrayal. The crowd gasped. Carter paused. Ridge blinked. Brooke tightened her grip on his hand. Taylor's voice rang out, clear and cutting. This ceremony cannot continue. Not until the truth is revealed. Ridge's eyes narrowed. Taylor, not now, he warned. But she wasn't listening to him. She addressed the room. For decades, we've watched Ridge dance between personal desire and family loyalty. Today, he planned to make a personal vow while hiding a professional betrayal. At that moment, Steffi handed Taylor a small box. Inside was a USB drive and a single printed image. Taylor turned to Carter. Play this. Everyone deserves to know who Ridge really is before anyone says I do. Carter hesitated. Ridge stepped forward. Enough of this, but Thomas's voice boomed from the back. Sit down, Dad. You owe us this. The weight in his voice made Ridge stop. The screen flickered on. A recording played. The audio was unmistakable. Ridge's voice, speaking with a lawyer. Calm, methodical, and damning. He was ordering the quiet transfer of funds from Forrester Creations' discretionary account into an off-the-books entity. He authorized the movement of capital to a private trust in Dubai. Make sure it's split, he said in the clip. And make sure no one, especially Thomas, finds out. Then came the real bomb. Once the wedding's over, I'll use Brooke's vote to override the board. Gasps swept the room. Then came the image. A time-stamped photo of Ridge, alone in the Forrester executive office at 2:13 a.m. just days before the wedding, signing an authorization document. Forrester seals, his signature, all clear. It was real. It was recent. And it wasn't a mistake. It was a betrayal. Thomas stepped forward. I left town because I couldn't watch this anymore. But now I'm back. And I refuse to let this company legacy hijacked by someone who puts himself before the family. Ridge started to defend himself, but Thomas raised a hand. Don't speak. You've spoken enough. I came here with one purpose, to officially declare that I no longer support your leadership at Forrester Creations. It wasn't just symbolic. Thomas produced a formal document, co-signed by Steffi and backed by a small but powerful group of Forrester board members and shareholders. It called for an emergency vote of no confidence in Ridge Forrester as CEO, effective immediately. Ridge stared at his children, stunned. You're turning on me, he asked, his voice a whisper. Steffi's eyes were glassy but firm. We're protecting what you taught us to build. You lost sight of it, Dad, but it wasn't over. Taylor wasn't finished. There's more, she said quietly. Something that goes beyond company politics. Something that crosses into criminal. She handed another folder to Deputy Chief Baker, who had been quietly observing from the back of the venue, invited for security. Inside, forensic accounting reports, compiled over several years, showing that Ridge had systematically moved portions of company profits to a network of hidden accounts offshore, some in Dubai, some in the Cayman Islands, and at least one under the name of a shell company tied to a tax shelter in Liechtenstein. There were bank statements, wire transfers, emails, some signed directly by Ridge, some done through proxies, but the trail was clear. Taylor looked directly at Ridge. You didn't just fail us. You broke the law. And you broke our trust Before Ridge could process the weight of what was happening, Chief Baker stepped forward, hands ready. Ridge Forrester, you are under arrest for tax evasion, corporate fraud, and embezzlement. Anything you say, but the rest was drowned out by gasps and Brooke's cry. No. This can't be happening, Brooke screamed, clutching Ridge's arm as he was placed in cuffs. But Ridge didn't fight. He didn't argue. His face was pale, hollow. His world, his love, his company, his family was crumbling in real time. As the press flooded the estate gates, news broke like wildfire. Ridge Forrester arrested at wedding. Forrester CEO exposed for years of fraud. Power struggle ignites inside legendary fashion house. Brooke was left at the altar, humiliated beyond repair. Her marriage over before it began. Her influence shattered. Her daughter Hope tried to comfort her, but she too was shaken. She had no words. Thomas, now backed by Eric and Steffi, was named interim CEO pending a full board vote. The family divided overnight. RJ fled town. Katie and Donna distanced themselves. Liam and Wyatt demanded transparency as investors. Carter offered to step down as legal counsel, having officiated the failed wedding that turned into a takedown. The Forrester offices were put under immediate audit. The FBI was contacted. International banking regulators began inquiries. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Brooke sat alone in Ridge's empty office, holding the wedding ring he never got the chance to place on her finger. Ridge, behind bars, awaited his hearing. He refused visitors. He refused to speak to Thomas or Steffi. But one night, in a moment of weakness, he wrote a letter. Not to Brooke, not to Taylor, to Eric, the man who built the company, the father who once believed in him. The letter didn't beg for forgiveness. It didn't make excuses. It simply said, I tried to protect the family. Somewhere along the way, I forgot what family meant, but the damage was done. The Forrester empire was wounded, divided, distrusted by the public, by partners, by the fashion world itself. A house built on style now stood in scandal. And yet for the first time in a long time, Thomas stood tall. He didn't manipulate. He didn't lie. He exposed the truth. And now the question was not who would lead Forrester next. It was whether it would survive at all. The bold and the beautiful. Thomas rises, Brooke breaks, and Taylor walks away as Forrester faces a new era in the aftermath of the wedding turned wreckage. Nothing remained untouched. The flowers had wilted, the guests had vanished, the cameras had stopped flashing, and Brooke Logan sat alone in what was supposed to be her fairy tale ending. But instead of holding Ridge's hand, she held the cold truth. Ridge wasn't coming back. Not to the altar. Not to her. Not to anyone. And maybe this time forever really meant over. Ridge's arrest sent shockwaves across Los Angeles. The headlines were relentless. Fashion vlogs, mainstream outlets, business papers, they all ran with variations of the same phrase. From runway to prison, Ridge Forrester falls for Brooke. It wasn't just the legal scandal that shattered her. It was the betrayal. The years she spent defending Ridge, standing by him, believing in the dream of Bridge, all erased by the realization that he had planned to use their marriage as a shield for financial manipulation. The trust was gone. The magic was dead. Brooke tried to visit Ridge in custody. She showed up at the holding facility, dressed impeccably, still clinging to some fragile hope that there would be an explanation, a reason, a sliver of love to hold on to. But Ridge refused to see her. No visit, no message, no apology, just silence. That silence cut deeper than any lie. Hope tried to comfort her mother, but even she was wrestling with her own doubts. Watching Thomas stand on principle, reject manipulation, and expose the truth, something inside Hope shifted. She couldn't reconcile the Thomas she once feared with the man she saw at the altar. And that made everything around her, including her mother's blind loyalty, feel suddenly unstable. Meanwhile, Taylor Hayes made her decision. She had come back to Los Angeles to fight for her family's integrity. She never expected it would mean watching Ridge in handcuffs or seeing her children forced into damage control mode. She was exhausted. Decades of pain, triangles, betrayals, and moral high ground had taken their toll. And after the dust settled, she knew it was time. Taylor called a family meeting with Steffi and Thomas. Her voice was soft, steady. "I've done all I can here. You two don't need me hovering. You're strong. You're capable. And you're building something new without Ridge. I need to take a step back, find peace somewhere else." She didn't say goodbye in dramatic fashion. No emotional breakdowns. No tears on the steps of Forrester Creations. Just one long, lingering look at the family she fought so hard to keep together. And then she was gone. Bags packed. Passport in hand. Destination unknown. With Ridge out of the picture, Thomas officially stepped in as interim CEO of Forrester Creations. It wasn't symbolic this time. The board ratified it in a decisive vote. Eric, though hesitant, offered his blessing. Steffi agreed to stay on as Coco, managing operations while Thomas led design, strategy, and brand revival. And the first thing Thomas did, he opened the books. He called in independent auditors, restructured the financial departments, and announced a transparency-first campaign to repair Forrester's reputation. He met with international partners, flew to Paris to reassure vendors, and fired two executives complicit in Ridge's shady dealings. The fashion press took notice. Thomas Forrester, the redemption CEO, splashed across the cover of multiple outlets. Slowly, cautiously, Forrester Creations began to stabilize. But not everyone was celebrating. Brooke, isolated and drowning in humiliation, retreated from public life. Her once lively home became a fortress of silence. She avoided calls from Katie and Donna. She didn't show up to Hope's press launch. She even skipped a family brunch at Eric's, too embarrassed to face the people who once saw her as the queen of the Forrester world. In her mind, she had been played, used, and the man she thought would grow old with her turned out to be capable of betrayal far greater than she was willing to sacrifice her, his company, and his legacy for control. And then came the final blow. Ridge, from jail, sent Brooke divorce papers, not a letter, not a phone call, just a document, dry and cold. Attached was a brief note, handwritten. "It's better this way, Brooke broke." She tore the pages apart in her kitchen, screaming into an empty house, dropping to the floor with nothing but the weight of 2 decades of devotion crushing her. For the first time in her life, there was no scandal, no rebound, no next man waiting. There was only grief and regret. But the world moved on. Thomas, once the outcast, now stood before the Forrester staff in the main conference room and gave the most important speech of his life. This company has survived scandals, betrayals, and heartbreak because at its core, it's always been about family and fashion. That won't change under my watch. I'm not my father. I'm not perfect. But I'm here to rebuild. Not just the brand but the trust. He restructured the teams. He promoted fresh designers. He reopened talks with Hope for the future, hinting at a new collaboration where he and Hope would be creative equals. Hope hesitated but agreed to meet. Their history was tangled, but something about Thomas now felt different. Grounded. Real. Back at the jail, Ridge waited. His court date loomed. His legal team scrambled for a plea bargain. There were whispers of a multi-year sentence, but none of that frightened Ridge. What haunted him most was that this time, he had no one left to fight for him. Not Brooke. Not Taylor. Not even his own children. And so, while Ridge sat in silence behind bars, the Forrester empire moved forward without him. Brooke stared at the ocean from her balcony every morning, trying to remember who she was before Ridge. Taylor found quiet peace in the hills of Tuscany, painting again, letting herself breathe. And Thomas walked into his father's old office, no longer shadowed by legacy, but lit by something far more powerful, his own future. And in the world of the bold and the beautiful, when a king falls, the kingdom doesn't crumble. It reinvents itself. And the next chapter is already waiting.
Oh.